In Moonshiners Season 14, Episode 9, tensions flare and innovation takes center stage as the cast continues their high-stakes operations. Mark and Huck receive a surprising call from Mike Cockrell, who requests a meeting to end their long-standing feud. This comes after Mike managed to track Mark's liquor site with his drone, but failed to exact revenge. Mark managed to lock up their truck as he escaped his sight, initially unsure whether it was law enforcement on his tail. The feud dates back to when Mark blew up Mike's liquor site for encroaching on his territory. Sign up for our newsletter, get updates on the latest posts and more from monsters and critics straight to your inbox. By submitting your information, you agree to our T and CS and privacy policy. Initially reluctant, Mark Rogers eventually agrees to meet, but insists the meeting take place at his home. When Mike arrives, Mark is skinning an animal and keeps his knife in hand throughout their conversation. Mike proposes a truce, asking both sides to respect territorial boundaries. Mark accuses Mike of crossing the line that sparked their rivalry, but the two ultimately agree to keep their operations separated by the Broad River. Meanwhile, Mike and Jerry embark on a risky upgrade to their submarine still, adding a towering column designed for vodka production and flavor infusion. Using muscadines, they create a rye vodka with fruity undertones. However, the duo encounters issues when they forget to include an essential steam condensing element. Jerry improvises with a small P-trap, resolving the problem and allowing them to resume production. The muscadine vodka is a success, and Mike is pleased by its unique taste. Elsewhere, Josh Owens makes a triumphant return after recovering from a life-threatening motorcycle injury. Determined to rebuild his moonshine operation, Josh enlists the help of his friend Big Chuck, who supported him financially during his recovery. Big Chuck, eager to expand his own business, is keen to learn the art of distilling. The pair checks on a corn mash they prepared the previous week, which is now ready for use. With 370 gallons of mash, they produce approximately 50 gallons of moonshine. Later, Josh reconnects with his racer friends to sell 40 gallons of his product. Reflecting on his near-death experience, Josh admits he misses racing, but is committed to exercising caution moving forward. A teaser for next week's episode shows Josh returning to racing, leaving his friends and family concerned. Moonshiners airs Tuesdays at 9/8 on Discovery. Moonshiners Season 14, Episode 9. Mark Rogers ends feud with Mike Cockrell as Josh Owens returns to moonshining. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the Appalachian Mountains, the perfect setting for yet another thrilling chapter of Moonshiners. Season 14, Episode 9, titled Mark Rogers ends feud with Mike Cockrell as Josh Owens returns to moonshining, brought fans on a roller coaster ride of emotions, surprises, and, as always, some moonshine-making action. The episode kicked off with the unmistakable sound of chainsaws and the steady clank of metal as moonshiners from all across the region prepared their stills for the season's first big run. The air was thick with anticipation as the temperatures started to drop, signaling the perfect time for distillation. But this episode wasn't just about the usual craft of moonshining. This one was about repairing old wounds, old rivalries, and the return of a beloved figure from the past. The feud. Mark Rogers and Mike Cockrell at the heart of the episode was the long-running feud between Mark Rogers and Mike Cockrell. Fans of the show knew that the two moonshiners had been at odds for years. Their rivalry wasn't just personal. It had taken on a life of its own in the moonshiners universe. While Mark was known for his smooth, clear shine and his calm demeanor, Mike was a more brash, fearless character. Their differences had led to more than a few confrontations on and off screen, but as with all good television drama, there was always a glimmer of hope for resolution. The episode began with a surprisingly mature meeting between Mark and Mike at a rustic cabin on the outskirts of town. The two men, who had spent years avoiding each other's presence, found themselves face to face in a quiet moment that seemed to hold more weight than any of their past encounters. It was clear that the years of rivalry had taken a toll on both of them, and the years-long tension was finally bubbling to the surface. Mark, looking more relaxed than usual, spoke first. "Mike, we've been at odds for a long time, and I think it's time we let it go. The whole us versus them attitude doesn't do anything for the shine, and it doesn't do anything for our futures. We need to leave this in the past." Mike, ever the skeptic, took a long look at Mark before responding. "You think that just because we sit down and talk, it's all gonna magically be better?" His voice was rough, behind the bravado. Mark nodded. "I do. We're both in the business of making something good. Why waste that energy on hate when there's more to be gained by working together?" For a few moments, there was only silence between the two men as the weight of Mark's words seemed to sink in. In that silence, it was clear that this was a turning point, not just for the two of them, but for their entire moonshining careers. After a deep breath, Mike finally broke the silence. "All right, Mark. I'm willing to give it a shot. Let's see if we can put this behind us." The handshake that followed was the kind of symbolic moment that could only happen after years of personal and professional tension. It was a powerful moment, not just for the characters, but for the show itself. Fans of the show had witnessed the evolution of their rivalry, and now they were witnessing its end. The return of Josh Owens' Mark and Mike's reconciliation set the tone for the episode. Another dramatic moment was about to unfold. Josh Owens, a fan-favorite moonshiner who had stepped away from the business for some time, made his long-awaited return. Josh's absence from Moonshiners had left a gap in the show's dynamic, with many wondering what had happened to the skilled and passionate distiller. His return to the fold was the talk of the moonshine world, and when he finally appeared on screen, it was clear that he hadn't lost his touch. The camera panned over the familiar hills as Josh drove his truck down a narrow gravel road that led to a secluded location deep in the mountains. His eyes were focused, determined, and there was a sense of anticipation in his stride. As he stepped out of the truck, he took a deep breath of the mountain air, a feeling that had always connected him to the moonshining life. "Feels good to be back," Josh said with a smile as he looked around, taking in the landscape that had shaped so much of his life. "It's been a while, but moonshining never leaves your blood. I've missed this." Josh's return wasn't just about him coming back to the business. He had unfinished business of his own. As the episode unfolded, it became clear that Josh wasn't just returning to distill. He was also returning to help rebuild the moonshining community that had been fractured over the years. His return would serve as a bridge, not just between past and present moonshiners, but between different factions of the trade. One of Josh's first tasks was to help Mark and Mike improve their recipe. As the two men worked on their stills, Josh walked in, offering both advice and guidance. His knowledge of the craft was unparalleled, and even Mike, who had often been dismissive of others, found himself listening intently to Josh's suggestions. "Y'all are using the wrong kind of corn," Josh remarked as he examined their mash. "You need something a little sweeter, a little more flavorful if you want this to stand out." Mark and Mike exchanged glances, surprised by the accuracy of Josh's observation. They had spent years refining their own methods, but it was clear that Josh still had the skill and expertise to take their shine to the next level. "It's all about balance," Josh continued. "The right corn, the right temperature, and most importantly, the right patience. If you rush this, you'll lose the flavor." With Josh's input, Mark and Mike's stills began to take shape in ways they hadn't anticipated. It was clear that Josh wasn't just a moonshiner. He was a teacher, a mentor, and someone who could bring out the best in others. His return wasn't just about making moonshine. It was about sharing the knowledge and wisdom he had gained over the years. The moonshine runners, the day wore on. The three men worked together to perfect the mash and prepare for their first run of the season. The air was thick with the smell of fermenting corn, the crackling of the fire beneath the stills, and the low hum of excitement as they neared the moment when their work would come to fruition. But, as with every moonshine run, there was always the risk of things going wrong. With the law always on the lookout, the three men knew they had to move quickly and stay under the radar. As they prepared to distill, they kept a watchful eye on the mountains around them, knowing that one wrong move could land them in hot water. As the stills heated up, the first drops of moonshine began to flow. Mark, Mike, and Josh watched with satisfaction as the clear liquid began to flow into jars, the color shimmering in the sunlight. It was a moment of triumph, a reminder that despite all the struggles and tensions, the craft of moonshining remained as powerful as ever. I gotta say, Mike said with a grin, "This is the best batch I've seen in a long time." "You might have just saved my ass, Josh." Josh chuckled, taking a swig from his own jar. "It's not about saving anyone. It's about making something good and sharing it with the people who appreciate it." The episode ended with the three men celebrating their success.